Thanks for choosing us. We are your home of independent, fearless, incredible journalism. Now, President John Dramani Mahama met with heads of all security agencies this morning before a crucial visit to Bawuku to mediate tensions in the area. The discussion focused on creating a conducive environment for dialogue as President John Dramani Mahama prepared to lead efforts to address the root causes of the conflict during his visit to the area. Now, before his trip to Bawuku, President John Dramani Mahama, in a meeting with the National House of Chiefs, revealed that chieftaincy disputes were a major concern in all the security briefings he has received since he assumed office as president. Let's listen.
Passes away, and a new chief has to be selected. Invariably, two rival chiefs or three rival chiefs suddenly appear. In the 1992 Constitution, it was decided from the unpleasant experiences of the past where government used to interfere in chieftaincy matters to leave the issue of chieftaincy completely to the chiefs themselves. That is the National House of Chiefs and the regional houses of chiefs. But then I do think that there are issues that come up, especially with the selection of new chiefs that creates security crisis. And so when law and order breaks down, government is called in to protect the peace. And so I think that we must work with you to see how we can prevent this from happening. I remember that at a point, it was decided that there should be a codification of the lines of succession. I don't know how far that project has gone, but it looks like the issue of disputes is becoming even worse by the day than it was before this codification took place. And so that's an issue that I think we should look at.
Well, this afternoon, President John Dramani Mahama hopes to bring lasting peace to troubled Bawuku. He met with all security chiefs before his trip to Bawuku this morning. And presidential correspondent Maxwell Agbawa joins me in the studio. Maxwell, tell me more about his meeting and what he's seeking to achieve.
So that meeting took place at the Jubilee Lounge at the Kotoka International Airport. That was shortly before John Mahama took a flight to Tamale and then to Bawuku. So at this particular meeting, we had all the heads of security, present there on the ground. So we had the Chief of Defense Staff, he was there. We also had the Inspector General of Police, George Kufu Dampare, he was also in that meeting. We had the head of the Ghana Immigration Service. He was also in that meeting. And then we had the head of the Ghana National Fire Service also in that meeting. So we had all the heads of the state security agencies present, at that meeting. I must say that it was very cordial, and they had interactions. The Chief of Defense Staff spoke on behalf of the heads of security agencies who were present there. And he assured John Mahama of their unflinching support in his reset agenda. He stated that they have been collaborating, in ensuring that there's peace and stability in Ghana. And their aim is to continue with that collaboration. And they promised their unflinching support to John Mahama to help him, succeed. So we can hear from Chief of Defense Staff this morning.
First of all, let me thank you very much on behalf of the heads of the security services and agencies for receiving us this morning. Mr. President, we are here to join our voices with the good people of Ghana and the international community to congratulate you on assumption of office as the President of the Republic and Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces. Mr. President, we want to assure you of our loyalty, professionalism, and dedication. We've been working together as a team, meeting all the complex challenges of the security environment. By working together as a team, we've been able to keep this country quiet and stable. Mr. President, I want to assure you that we are going to continue with even greater zeal to ensure that we maintain the security and stability of this country. I want to assure you of our unflinching support and dedication, as I said, to duty, and make sure that we help you to achieve or realize your objective of resetting Ghana. Mr. President, once again, thank you very much for receiving us this morning. We are grateful, and we wish you the best. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
The Chief of Defense Staff there. And I'm just wondering what briefing they gave him, because I could see the IGP seated there. And so this is like a 360 view of our security situation in the country. What's his response?
Yeah, so we had President Mahama also responding to the CDS, who spoke on behalf of the heads of the state security agencies. Now, he mentioned that he should have had this interaction with them right after the election. Okay. But it was quite difficult because of the number of guests who came for the inauguration. So it was quite busy. There were a lot of visits and all of that. So the meeting that took place this morning should have happened earlier. But he said that he was excited about how they're going about their work. And he mentioned to them that we have security threats internally and then externally. Internally, he talked about chieftaincy disputes. And you remember that in that meeting with the National House of Chiefs, the issue of chieftaincy disputes, came up strongly. And he mentioned that in all the briefings that he has received after he was elected as president, one of the major security concerns was the issue of chieftaincy disputes. So again, he talked about an internal threat, chieftaincy dispute. He talked about armed robbery. And he said externally also, there are threats, and the threats is the threat on our northern borders regarding terrorism and all of that. And he's urging the security agencies to collaborate and ensure that no vacuum is created. So we can hear from him right now.
Thank you very much. Let me thank all of you for the work that you've done for our motherland in terms of keeping our people safe and protecting both internal and external security. We should have held this ceremony on the 7th, immediately after the inauguration, but as you know, we're overwhelmed by visitors, and some of those who came on the 7th left just a few days ago. They enjoyed Ghana so much that they were not in a hurry to leave. But I want to thank you for the good work. This last election has cemented our reputation as the leading democracy in Africa. And a good part of the thanks go to you, the security services, who have maintained the peace. We still have threats to our peace that we must continue to look at internally and externally. Internally, to do with chieftaincy disputes and some incidents of armed robbery and things like that. Externally, to do with the threats on our northern borders. And so we cannot let our vigilance down. There should be no vacuum. And so you must all continue to work, as the CDS said, zealously, to make sure that there's no breach of the peace in the country. And so I want to thank you for all the work you're doing. We're working hard to set up the Council of State so that we can start to put the controlling boards of all the services and all the government parastatals in place. And so once we have the Armed Forces Council and the Prisons Council and all of them set up, all your service councils, we're sure that we'll begin to look at how to manage things in respect of any outstanding issues that exist. But in the meantime, I expect you all to work very closely together like you've been doing, and continue to keep the country safe for all of us. And so I want to thank you for attending to our call at quite short notice, and to ask you to continue to work in the interests of the people of Ghana.
President John Dramani Mahama there. Now, he arrived in Bawuku some hours ago, and just listening to him is raising concerns about security and internal threats. Key focus he makes mention of, Maxwell, is about chieftaincy disputes and how it's affecting security in the country. The reason why he went to Bawuku, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it's one of the key reasons why he's in Bawuku, to ensure that there is peace in that long-standing conflict that is ongoing there. So earlier today, the presidency released the media advisory, and it described it as a peace mission, to Bawuku and Nalerigu, in an attempt to bring, long-lasting peace there. Like you mentioned, he arrived there sometime, some minutes after 12.
Okay.
He arrived there on the ground, and then his first port of call was the overlord of Bawuku. He had interactions with him behind closed doors, and then he later came out to address the teeming number of people who had gathered, there to welcome him. And he talked about his promise to ensure that there is peace in Bawuku. It was part of his campaign message during the heated campaigns. In fact, I remember during one of the visits to the Bawuku area, it was one of the things that he mentioned, that at a time that if he's elected, he's going to ensure that there's long-standing peace, in Bawuku. So he reiterated his commitment, to that, and he also gave an indication that in the next days they're going to appoint the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Interior, and all the people who matter in the security space. And it is believed that when all of these people are elected, long-lasting peace, will be brought to, Bawuku.
Let's listen to him.
Well, Mahama has explained everything that transpired in the room with my father, the Zugurana and overlord of Bawuku. I just want to emphasize a bit of what he said. If you remember, I came here to seek the blessings of my father for the election, and God granted our heart's desire, and I got elected. And so my first mission was to come and say thank you to him. Again, during the campaign, I stated that if God granted our desire and I was elected president, bringing peace to Bawuku was going to be one of my #1 priorities. So today is exactly 1 week when I was sworn in at the Black Star Square. And it's my first major assignment outside Accra. And so I decided to come and assure you that we're going to work very hard to make sure that we bring peace back to Bawuku. I remember when I was president, Bawuku and surrounding areas were very peaceful, and work was going on, people were going about their duties. It's sad that this situation has occurred again. And I know that for the last 3 years, you have not been able to sleep. You've been living under stress. And so the priority of our government will be to bring peace back to Bawuku so that everybody can go about his duties without fear of harassment. We want to assure you that we're putting in place the various appointments so that we can have ministers and other officials who are responsible for the security to take charge. And so within this week, we will do the appointments of the Minister of Defense, the Minister of Interior, the National Security Advisor, the National Security Coordinator, the BNI Director, and all the others. And when these appointments are made, I'm going to charge them to make Bawuku one of the #1 priorities that they attend and deal with. And so I'll appeal to you to exercise patience, exercise restraint, and to let you know that I am apprised of the issue, I'm going to deal with it, and I can assure you, have trust in myself and this administration that by the grace of God, peace is going to come back, permanent peace is going to come back to Bawuku. And so, as my younger brother said, from here we'll continue to Nalerigu.
Well, we are still looking at security, and in the studio with me I have Mukhtar Mumuni Mukhtar. He is joining us for a conversation as we look at the security angle to all this. And we're bringing security to the fore because the president is worried about both internal issues and external issues. And that's your specialty. So let's start with his internal concerns, especially with chieftaincy disputes, Bawuku to be precise. But before we go into that, he met with some of the key, individuals when it comes to security in that country. We call them the chiefs. And so we're just looking at his expectation of them, looking at how long you've been in this space. What should be his focus?
Well, I think what we saw in terms of the president meeting the security chiefs, it's not anything new. It's a regular feature of presidents, newly elected presidents meeting the security chiefs of the country. And of course, by now he would have been having security briefings, which is totally different from what we have seen. And this meeting today, it's to sort of, touch base with the security chiefs. And, and from the end of the security chiefs, you saw a sense of realignment of commitment and loyalty to the new leadership. You saw the Chief of Defense Staff speaking in a language that appears to be a situation of not switching allegiance, but realigning the allegiance of the security chiefs to the new presidency and leadership that is in place. And of course, as a regular feature, some of the security chiefs will be changed. And if you look at the history of, for example, the Chief of Defense Staff, throughout our history from 2000, most of those security chiefs do not often last any time beyond, March. And so we're expecting that in the next couple of months, we'll have some change of, this leadership within the security space. But I see a sense of urgency and priority given to security by the new president. And I think given the fact that he's been president before, he will probably look at security differently. Security has been a big thing in this country. And of course, from where I sit in terms of counterterrorism, we have not been attacked, but we are actually under siege within the region. Entire space of West Africa is under siege in terms of violent extremism and external threat to this country. And so, having watched, sitting as, as a former president or opposition leader, and seeing the trend and being briefed by his own people, he would see security as a priority. And to the extent that we have Bawuku has been, a very long, outstanding, unresolved chieftaincy, ethnic and land-related dispute. And if you remember, during the campaign, one of the biggest, promises he made to the people of Bawuku is the fact that he will oversee the resolution to the crisis or the problem in Bawuku. And of course, several other promises were made during that particular campaign, trip. And today you saw him go back to Bawuku and trying to, of course, thanking the people of Bawuku and also renewing his commitment to resolving the crisis in Bawuku and other promises that he had made in that place. And I think that sets a very good tone in terms of what we need to see in the security space. This country has been, grappling with serious issues of land, unresolved chieftaincy and land disputes. Chieftaincy and ethnic dispute is the single biggest source of fatality and insecurity in this country. And it's, it is in good order that we are seeing the president, make a show of starting that as, as a priority.
Now, I'm just wondering, looking at Bawuku specifically, the issue in Bawuku has been spanning for decades, and several governments have tried to resolve the issue in Bawuku himself as well. I'm just wondering, looking at the root causes of the conflict we're facing at Bawuku, what different method do you propose that this government adopt to solve the problem?
For a fact, like I mentioned, Bawuku has been under siege of chieftaincy, ethnic crisis, especially in the last 3 years. And there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of fatigue, there's a lot of hopelessness. And it appears that Bawuku has defied all known applicable conflict resolution, practices. And so there's a need for us to expand the scope of, the methods and approaches and kind of summon a new spirit to deal with it. And as as a government is so powerful that they have that commitment, they have that capacity. What we need is a kind of political will that prioritizes the resolution of the conflict and invest in terms of resources, invest in terms of commitment to dealing with it. We saw a similar situation in the case of the Dagbang crisis. It is one of the single biggest crisis at the time. And when government put enough effort and resources, and of course with other stakeholders, we saw that addressed properly, that has been resolved. And so Bawuku is a situation that required that kind of goodwill, political goodwill to deal with. And it looks very promising that the president chose to travel out of Accra as the first trip out of Accra to deal with it. And I'm very hopeful that we would make a headway.
But then goodwill, is it enough to deal with the issue at Bawuku? Looking at the security situation, what immediate steps you propose he implements to help curb and de-escalate tensions in the area?
I won't be naive. I'm not oblivious of the reality of the complexity of Bawuku. It's not an easy situation. And, and it requires a lot of, commitment and investing time and resources. So first of all, you need to build a kind of coalition of people who would engage stakeholders. You need to begin. Peace is, come about, and the first step is to begin to talk to people and talk to all these key stakeholders, to map out a new strategy and a new approach. And I think that the president is surrounded by a lot of very well-driven experts in terms of security. A lot of them are old security chiefs in this place who's been around for the last 30, 40 years. And they would, come together and propose what kind of strategy would work this time. But of course, it would involve all stakeholders, including civil society, the religious community, and traditional leadership. What I see now is that it's a chieftaincy conflict that has transformed into different levels of conflicts. People are engaged in attacks, especially young people, engaging revenge attacks against each other, settling scores, and people expanding that to include, plain situations of armed robbery and criminality. And so the real cause of that conflict has been lost over time. I mean, the transformation of the conflict include all these other elements. And so all of those will be put, on the table in terms of how you do address the immediate issues, before you look at the key driving factors of the conflict. We see on social media used to provoke violence, to incite hatred, to incite anger amongst people, which has nothing at all to do with the original cause of the conflict. We've seen situations where there's a terminology by cyber analysts called doxing, where people actually would make a situation of warning individuals using social media. We know you, we know where you are, we know what you've done and we'll come after you. And they actually do. And we've seen a lot of those happening on social media. And so all of those will be part of the discussion in terms of how we move forward with Bawuku. But I expect that we would have a kind of committee or commission that, set up to look at Bawuku. Bawuku is a very complex situation. And we would need a kind of committee headed by a very respected individual or, statesman who has a goodwill and support of both parties, who would speak and they would listen, who would have the benefit of, counselors who will guide the process in a way that would pointedly look towards a resolution of the conflict. And I think from my perspective and from our center, this is one of the ways we think will be effective in addressing the conflict.
Now, for individuals living in Bawuku, one of their major concerns, especially business owners, is the impact this long-standing conflict has had on their businesses. Each time there are tax reprisals, they have to lock up their shops. How best do you feel government can help address the business community in Bawuku and provide relief to them even as they look at fixing the current problem at Bawuku?
Yes, already the security agencies are already in place in trying to help restore calm and security in the area. And we've seen several situations where, security is deployed to be able to forestall security in the area in terms of when there's an outbreak of incidents. We've seen the market center, which is the big hub for most traders. you know, depending on what the situation is, the security in that area. The complex issue about it is that once there's that kind of situation, it makes it difficult for businesses to thrive. We've seen a lot of reports of people who have locked up offices, who have locked up their shops, locked up shops for months without opening, or just open a couple of times in a week or in a month. And that situation does not allow the typical thriving business, thriving, you know, Bawuku that it used to be. And so it's a complex thing to be able to keep businesses running in our current state. And so there's a need to be able to put in enough efforts to bring in some sort of sanity that assures people a sense of security and a sense of assuredness for people to be willing to get back into, you know, to doing business. Today we have a lot of people from Bawuku who are in Bolga, you know, who have relocated to Bolga to do business, who have relocated to Tamale and several parts of southern Ghana because Bawuku is no longer, you know, a feasible place in terms of sustainability of their businesses. And so it's important that we prioritize security and get Bawuku back to normalcy.
Some people have proposed that it's time for government to crack the whip and crack the whip hard to deter individuals from committing these acts that lead to violence. Do you think that approach should be adopted?
One of our biggest frustrations in this conflict has been the lack of, we haven't seen enough commitment to prosecuting individuals engaged in mayhem, engaged in, you know, fatalities, killings and all that. You know, from the 2000s when we had, big situations of, you know, fatalities, up to this point, there have been several individuals who have been left off the hook. We haven't had enough arrests that have led to prosecutions. In fact, a couple of days back, there's been some attacks, and you know, as part of that, there were some arrests that were made, and I felt quite emboldened by the fact that immediately after those incidents happened, there's been some arrests, and I'm hoping that that trend would continue, and not just arrest, but follow through to ensure prosecution. If we do not ensure prosecution and deterrence for these kinds of things, it emboldens a lot more to continue to do it. And people are engaged in revenge attacks, people whose families and community members or friends have been killed without, you know, any kind of punishment, any kind of prosecution. You know, it encourages or emboldens them to engage in, you know, revenge attacks. And that has been a big part of what is going on. And so I'm very hopeful that the current administration will take a new approach to dealing with, you know, the criminal activities, some of them very purely criminal activities that are going on, ensure that not only should they arrest individuals, they should be able to prosecute individuals and have, you know, sentence them for their crimes. And also, I think that we seem to, we are not putting in enough efforts, when I say enough efforts, in terms of committing enough resources. Bawuku is not a place that is beyond our capacity in terms of state. The state is far more powerful than dealing with Bawuku. If you commit enough troops in Bawuku, security, you know, the military, the police forces in Bawuku, I know, I'm very confident that they would be able to succumb, you know, will succumb to security. Bawuku is not a place beyond state capacity. It's just a commitment that has led us to this place. And if we are really committed, Bawuku would be a thing of the past.
Let's shift our attention from Bawuku and focus on the national picture. Post the elections, there were acts of hooliganism recorded in parts of the country. And I'm sure in the president's briefing, he must have received these reports. After meeting the security chiefs, what should be his focus?
Well, we issued a post-security incident assessment report. And our conclusion is that this is one of the deadliest election events in our country since 1992. Last elections, 2020, we recorded 8 lives lost, 8 fatalities, and several breaches of security. In this December elections, we recorded 6 fatalities with several other breaches of security. And this involved the burning of a lot of facilities, including the arson involving Electoral Commission offices. Some of those EC offices involved ballot boxes that were burnt, and attacks on transportation facilities. All of this put together gives us a sense that this is one of the deadliest security election outcomes in our country. And I think that the president, as well as the other candidates who committed to peace, by signing the peace pact, I would have assumed that their goal would have been to see zero fatality in these elections. And yet that did not happen. In several jurisdictions, this is a normal exercise of civic, civilians in terms of exercising your civic duty at elections. The UK, for instance, within a space of 5 years, conducted 3 elections, 3 general elections. Not a single soul was lost due to participation in elections. We can do the same if we are committed to dealing with security. And I think the president, being a president before and having stayed away and watched, what has happened in this space, and seeing, the needless fatalities, relating to our elections, would be very committed to ensuring that we do not have that as a feature of our elections. And I think that the past government made a similar gesture when they moved a motion. They sponsored a bill in Parliament to pass the Vigilante and Other Offences Act. And that was meant to, take away the role of vigilante groups in our elections. And of course, that element reduces the tendency or the chances that we would have violence and we will have fatalities. And I think that this government, this president, should build on that and ensure that we completely eliminate the incidences of fatalities in our elections.
But then when some of these issues are spearheaded by individuals who many claim are loyal to the party, do you think they can crack the whip?
Well, so that's what
because political interference is always very difficult to contain when it comes to delivering justice.
It is difficult if you prioritize other interests ahead of national interest. And that's why we have struggled to deal with a lot of things. If you go back to the Ayawaso West Wagon situation, the violence that happened, the needless situation of violence that happened, and the setting up of the commission, led by the very, very respected Emil Short, they came out with a very impressive findings, and yet we failed to carry through those recommendations. And it was that situation of prioritizing, party interest over national interest. If we allow party interest or other considerations to guide us or supersede national interest, that is where that narrative holds. That is difficult when politicians are involved. It is difficult if one of your own is involved. If you actually are focused on the idea that we are building a nation, no interest should supersede that of national interest. And I think if you begin well, like our president begins well by showing and indicating his commitment to national interest in every single endeavor, it would send that cue to everyone, every appointee and citizens that this is the focus of this leadership and that this is what the nation, must rally behind in changing that narrative, that there are other considerations that can or must supersede national interest.
As we wrap up the conversation, and I would like you to put together the answer for me in the briefest possible way, but we're looking at your description of Africa. You say Africa is under siege, and we're looking at the porous borders we have as a country and threats of terrorism. How best do you feel we deal with that as a country?
A lot of the problems we look at in terms of security, in terms of violent extremism, political instability, is a product or what I call a manifestation of the frustrations of people, especially young people who feel that their states are incapable of providing them what I call the entitlements of citizenship. The issues of jobs, job opportunities, the entire space of West Africa is a huge situation of joblessness among young people. The issues of, social services, roads, infrastructure, water, healthcare, education. These are the realities and the real needs of the population. And when people live in extended periods under those difficult situations, there's fatigue and a sense that a new system is better. And that's why we've seen in that very short space, coup situations, 4 coup situations in this region. It has never happened. That huge number of coups eventually leading to ceding from ECOWAS. ECOWAS is in a very difficult situation now, probably at any point in recent history. There's a huge situation, a risk of disintegration of ECOWAS. If you have 4 members of your group cede from your union and forming their own alliance, creating not necessarily a parallel or contradictory goals, but moving away from you, and the entire space of West Africa, we do not have enough good examples of what a democracy should look like. We don't have that. And that should be a huge, huge disincentive for young people who, are looking up to what the future holds for us. We need to be very intentional about the way we run development. We need to be intentional about the future that we create for young people. The average young person does not believe in this current system of leadership. And that's why we saw during inauguration the situation of applause for the military leadership that was present. That should not, isn't that ironic? We pride ourselves in democracy, a nation that's built around democracy and good governance, the rule of law, free media, civil society, and all that. And yet we had the young guy just a couple of years in the system struggling to address security, and yet he earns all the applause. It tells you something, and we must listen.
We must listen. Thank you so much, Mutara, for your time here on The Pulse. He is Executive Director and for